Let's call the meeting to order.
Wow.
It's our committee of the whole meeting. First up is department updates from the library.
Library was not able to be here. She did attach a report for your review. So we'll move, unless you have questions specific to that.
Seeing as there's nothing, we'll go to the fire department. Chief?
You? Okay, well, I used to hand these or give you guys these every month, and then it kind of got off from a little bit, and then now I figure, well, if we're coming together every other month for that, I'll just do a 2-month one at a time and save a little bit of effort and stuff on that. So just kind of gives a rundown of what we did over the last 2 months as far as calls. They're all listed. And as it says there, we had 25 calls over the 2 months, 19 in the city, and then 1 in each of Washington Township, or 3 in Washington Township, and then 1 each of mutual aid, 1 to Hazelton, Raleigh, and then 1 to Jessup. And out of those hours, it was 292 hours what we spent with the fire department in those 2 months, actual on calls. And then we did additional trainings. We had 229 hours in training. So we had 4 guys, I think, went over to Quad County Fire School that they put on every year. It's over in Waterloo. It's nice and local. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's right close by. So they were able to go over and do some pretty good hands-on training over there. Took it Saturday, and they did that. So it's kind of nice when they've got that. We've got some more that are going to be coming up here, and they're going to be heading down to Kirkwood. It's going to be Kirkwood, I think it's, or Coralville Fire is putting on some training down there too. So they're gonna be doing that this week, or this coming month here, so. So yeah, with that there, we did, between the trainings and the calls, 521 hours was spent with the fire department doing stuff. So, and as Scott there, we've got 6 firefighters that are be completing their firefighter 1 classes here in the next couple months. So that's 160 hours that those guys, since January, that they've, I won't say donated to the department because they get paid for their time while they're here. But their commitment shows that, you know, it's 160 hours that they spend away from their family and stuff. So that's a huge commitment for them, so. And we did have 2 firefighters that stepped down due to work and family time concerns. They both had changes in their job structure and was going to require more of their time away from home with just their job and needed to give up something somewhere. And the fire department is where they felt made the most sense. Can't really give up the job, so, and they can't give up the family, so that leaves the fire department. So it was nice that we got some out of them. It was 2 of the newer guys that haven't been off probation yet, but still had a lot of commitment out of them. We got some use out of them while we did. So they both are leaving in good standings to where if their life straightens out a little bit, they can have the opportunity to get back on, so.
They're totally gone. They're not going to do any voluntary.
Correct. Yep. So they turned in their gear and they just don't have the time to do it, so. So that's kind of where we're at. Like I said, you can kind of look through. We did have 1 controlled burn that we did for CRP. That was one of the trainings we had on there. Went out and burnt some CRP ground, about 14 acres of ground we went out and did. It's good hands-on training. We had a couple of the new guys on there, and they realized how quickly, it's just a grass fire. That grass fire can change into something major pretty quick if you're not watching it. So they realized how fast a grass fire can spread. So it was good hands-on. We've had contact from, I think, 3 people that they may want us to burn some structures for them. So 2 out in the country and 1 maybe in town. We haven't decided yet, but so that'll be some good hands-on training for some of the guys too. So.
Now, when you guys do that, like in town with the house, Dick, are there other departments that call you up and say, hey, Dick, I got 3 new guys, can they come in?
Yep. We usually, especially with because the nice thing is when you've got the houses to burn, you can also go in and do a little ripping and tearing on the inside. That's a training that you can't just do. So we'll usually have a night where we'll open it up to the county, and you'll have some new guys that want to come in, and they'll rip some plaster and lath or sheet rock, whatever's there, and they get an idea of the overhaul part of what you got to do it. So that's great. We get up on the roofs, we can cut some holes in the roof and stuff like that. So that type of training, yeah, we can have the Fire Service Training Bureau bring in a trailer and do training similar to it, but it's not the same thing. You know, it's just not the same. You can try to make it as realistic as you want to, but it's just not the same. So when the opportunities come along like that, we try to take advantage of them. So I'm going to make some phone calls with the DNR tomorrow and try to find out, okay, the ones out in the country and even the one in town. I know more about what requirements there are in town because we went through it last year with the one we did with the city. But out in the country, there's a lot less regulations. So find out, sometimes depending on what it is, they don't even care. They don't even want to know. So, and we've got to go out and take a look at them and find out to what degree, what extent they want done, so. But yeah, it's good training, so hopefully we can get into them and do them quick here,
Oh, yeah.
so. Any other questions? I think everything's been going pretty smooth lately, so hopefully it keeps that way.
Keep it that way?
We did have a pretty good structure fire a couple weeks ago, or it was just a garage, but another couple minutes, it would have been up into the attic of the house, and because it was I'll call it a semi-attached garage. It just had a breezeway connecting the garage. And the fire was going through the attic of the breezeway into the attic of the house pretty quick. So luckily, we got there when we did, and they got a pretty quick knockdown on it and stuff, so it could have been a lot worse.
Was that during the night that happened?
Yeah, it came in at 10:30 at night. So. But- So yeah, we had a good turnout with the guys, and they did what they needed to do when they got there, so.
Very good. Thank you, Dick.
All right. Thanks, Dick. Thank you.
Chief Nieder, you're up.
Good evening. So first I'll go through kind of the updates, and these were sent out last week, but Squad 54, which was delivered a while back, is scheduled to be outfitted at Raycom on May 16th. All the pieces are in for that. Squad 52, which we talked about at the council meeting about a month ago to order that actually has got a build sheet on it now. And so with that, they're looking at getting that in late June. So that'll hit us just perfectly for that budget year. And I've been working on making sure that all the stuff that we do there at the police department is in line with where it should be. And our in-house fees were changed a little bit to incorporate the cost of our materials. We're finding out that we were sending out USB thumb drives on discovery motions to defense attorneys, and we're just losing all that money. So we've upped those a little bit to take care of that. This week, as we were talking about earlier, the Regional K-9, the DLE course is taking place in Independence this week. I did a rough estimate on that for the economic impact, and on the low side of it, I see it at $25,000 to $30,000 is the economic impact. And I believe it might be more, but I wanted to be conservative with that. I think there's like 50 to 60 officers at that. A very good turnout. One of our officers participated in the drug take-back day with the Buchanan County Sheriff's Department. 48 pounds of medication was taken in. And that's something we're going to do on a regular basis from here on out. I've been working with Griffin Hickey from Pathways on a vape tobacco diversion education program because that seems to be one of the things we're getting the most of out of the high school is the vapes. Her and I have been working together. She'll actually implement it and take care of it, but I've been answering her questions and making recommendations. In response to a question you asked, John, about 5 months ago, you asked about getting DARE back in the elementary schools. So I've been in contact with the administration at the schools. They're not willing to commit to that long period of time for the DARE, but what we are going to do is we're going to get together. They already have some type of educational program that covers some of those topics as well as many more. And they are willing to incorporate our officer into that. So we're going to sit down with them, look at what that's going to look like, and try and get that going for the next school year. But that is upcoming. And so that's still been in the works. We participated in the library ride-along, which was, I think, the One Book, One Independence thing that Laura had for the kids over there at the library. This last week, we gave 2 of their winners ride-alongs, and that was well publicized. The month of April for us was very busy, just kind of a rundown, and you'll see these in the monthly report at next council meeting that I give to you every time, but I just wanted to let you know, we averaged 1.5 criminal charges per day over the last month of April. We had 11 for driving while suspended, barred and revoked, 7 for drug paraphernalia, 6 warrant arrests, 4 thefts, 3 disorderly conducts, 2 weapon charges, 2 failed to have ignition interlock device, 2 OWIs, 2 controlled substance charges, a terroristic threats, a sexual assault arrest, a vehicle theft, operating without owner's consent arrest, domestic abuse assault, and 1 eluding. There are some cases pending, though, that will have more charges coming from them that were out of April, but they're not done yet. So it was a very busy month for us, and if you think back to the time study sheet that I gave you to show you how much time it takes on the charges, imagine all these charges. So, but the officers are doing a good job, and they're finding stuff on the street. The next 2 things I want to talk to you about is some of our policy and procedures. So this got brought up by a few of the officers, and this was, the first thing is something I wanted to look at changing before we get to the point where we have to hire somebody again. It's not imminent, it's not happening, nobody's leaving right now, okay? But one of the things I want to look at and get the council's input on is the residency rule. Right now, we have it at 30 minutes, 30 miles type thing. I'd like to look at just dropping that, just due to the fact that 30 to 31 minutes, what's the difference? And part of the old school thought was with a residency rule and with a surrounding area rule is then they can come and respond to emergencies. Over the last weekend, I was in Dubuque, I was in Cedar Rapids, and I was in Cedar Falls. All of those times and places I was away from Independence. Now, again, I respond when they call, but it doesn't mean I'll be at home when the time comes up. So that's one of the things I want you to think about is the fact that before we get to this next one, because I know of one officer who lives in Farley, Iowa. It's on Highway 20, and he's told me if you ever have an opening, I want to apply. But he built a house, he's got a daughter and a wife there, and she's got a job, but he'd be one I'd love to bring on, and he's fully certified. And when we talk about hiring fully certified officers, you're going to find more of them that already have roots somewhere else. So it's a little bit harder to draw them in. It's not to say that they won't change and come over at a later time because they find out the great things about Independence and they want to come in. We've got one officer moving, actually put a bid in on a house and it didn't work out. He lives in Jessup now and he's trying to move back to Independence now. He sees the benefit of it and he's moving here. And so he'll keep trying to find a house, but so we're bringing him back in. So to try and force him to live within that, I think is in some ways for the hiring process especially can be difficult for us, and I don't think it gains us a lot. The second one I want to talk to you about is when we have take-home cars. Not the fact that everybody has their own car, but at night when a guy gets off at 4 a.m, he's got to be back in at 1 o'clock. A lot of times we'll send that car home with him. Used to be, when I was here, within a mile and a half, you could take that car outside of town and respond back in. I'd like to see that expanded if the council would agree to where we'd have it on a 5-mile basis. That would include Double L Drive. It would include the new addition out to the west towards Jessup. Is that T. Myers addition? Mm-hmm. Okay. It would include that. What's that?
Hunter's Ridge.
Hunter's Ridge, there you go. And some of those. And again, I'm not moving out of town, I'm staying. But it's a possibility that we'd have that. And if we have guys where they're taking home squads normally, that would be it. I think I know the council would worry about abuse and what they would do with it. But it's a little bit different than any other where they're not going to use their squad car to do anything else out in the county. at their house. This is just driving back and forth and emergency response only. So that's something I'd like to get the council's thoughts on as well. And in fact, it's one of them things that's gone back and forth over the years. I'd just like to see it to where if we had it at 5 miles, if you take a car home, you're fine. Waterloo PD always let their K-9 officers, 30 miles, they could take those cars. Because I knew Dave Taylor lived in LaPorte, and he drove that Waterloo squad car home every night because he had the K-9 with him. So that's another thing I'd like to see. Other than that, I'm open for questions now. I've
We have
covered
any
everything.
officers right now that would affect?
No, not right now. But what it would do, I think, is we know how tight the housing market is. And if a guy decides he's going to move to Hunter's Ridge or Double L Drive, he doesn't have to worry about that where now he can't take a car home or whatever reason. And we do want our officers to live in the city because they're employed by the city. But if they don't, and the officer has a house here now, that opens up our housing market for somebody else. And as we progress in our careers and our lives, obviously we move up to a little bit bigger and better house and leaves the old one behind for somebody else to improve. So I kind of see it as a win-win on that, on the housing market, because it opens up a house in the city for somebody else to come into. But no, we don't have anybody there. And again, as your administrator, I should be required to live in the city at all times because I'm your administrator and I should be required to be here at all times. But for the rest, I don't see it as necessary.
Chief, talking about the residency, and I know this is a hot topic statewide, and quite honestly, in adjoining states as well, but when you talk about having somebody being able to respond to an emergency and thus the residency, when's the last time we had an emergency incident where we had to call officers in off-duty to respond where time was imminent?
On a time imminent, never, because of pre-planning. So the last time we would have had a major call out that I remember would have been the flood of '98, when we had to have everybody on staff and on hand. And at that time, I think we had an officer who lived in Cedar Rapids, and he moved up here and moved in with somebody. And in fact, when the city was divided, we were living in different places anyway.
I think the only exception is that is our K-9 officer being called out to a different community or something like that. Is the only thing maybe that's relevant, Dave, maybe.
Yeah, so the K-9 officer, and so that's kind of one of the reasons I'd want to make sure on this, because our K-9 officer is the one who takes the car home all the time and gets called out more. A lot of his stuff does get planned, but that last minute stuff, so yeah, he has to have the car with the dog.
Right.
And I think this is one of them where if he decided he was going to move, it'd be a good thing for him too. And I don't see a huge issue with it. Again, we're not going to see him using his squad car to make adjustments to his lawn or something like that.
Right,
There's no way it can really be misused, and it's a marked unit anyway. But yeah, we really haven't had anything as far as emergency response where we say, hey, you got to get in here quick. A lot of times we go through a list and find the guy that can come in when somebody else is called in sick or whatever, where we have to call him in, and then we just go on a list anyway. 2 weekends ago, I was at Lake Panorama down south of Des Moines. Now, I let the captain know, hey, you're on. I'm completely out of it. But there are those times when some of us are outside of the area, we're just not getting back. Had they called and said something imminent, I would have said, I'll be there in the morning, keep it going until I get there type thing. So,
I think too, anytime a squad car travels within the community, even if it's to and from home, it increases visibility. I mean, I can go through and I can name where 3 of them sit, whether they be state trooper cars, whether they're trooper cars, whether they're sheriff's department cars or city squads. But you know where they're at. You see them throughout the community and things like that. I think that's a good thing
yep.
to have them out and about too.
And we've never had an issue as far as the sheriff's department goes, and a relationship that we have with the sheriff's department right now is stellar. So there wouldn't be any problem on their end if we had somebody outside the city limits. The only caveat with it is I would tell my officers, if you are taking that car home and you're outside the city limits, you will not participate in any call for service that originates out in the county. If you live in the city, you're paying our taxes, you're the ones that get our services. If you live out in the county, you're still going to have to call the county sheriff's department, and that would be one of those things too. So probably what I'll do is I'll draw two things up and we'll put them on next week's as an actionable item. But I did want to get you thinking about it now. That way, in the interim, if you have any questions, we can talk about them. And then when I come back next week with an actionable item list, you can have a better information instead of me just coming in and asking for it right up front. I don't like doing that.
The one caution I have for the council and for Dave, I don't think we're in a position like the sheriff's department where we have vehicles for each officer. We're not set up that way, and I know that's not your intent, Dave, but I just want to make sure everybody's clear. This is different than what the sheriff has, where everybody takes a car home.
Right, but part of it is that if, like on a Sunday, we're working one officer per shift on a Sunday when we can do that by union rule, to have the next officer coming in have his own car at the house, whether it be within 5 miles or in town, helps so that if the first shift officer is busy, the second shift officer comes on duty and he's out and working right away. It saves us that amount of time. So that would be the big thing, but absolutely, you're right. We don't have enough for take home. We're evaluating the thought of keeping 52 from this year, and that way we'll get it to where we'll have 2 officers per car. And then we'd have a much better way to respond. Plus, for emergencies, we'd have 1 more car, and that'd be great.
So it might not be the same officer taking the car home either.
Absolutely not. The only one would be is if Captain Lau decided to move out of town, or if the K-9 officer moved out of town. Because the 3 of us are the only ones that, well, and I don't even really have one yet anyway, because it's not fully outfitted, but the 3 of us will be the only ones that have take-home cars. Or, I'm sorry, Sergeant Isley has that unmarked that he has. So those are the only ones now. The rest of the department wouldn't be the same officer at all times, and it never is now, other than those 4, which I've told you. So if it was one of those 3 others, Isley, Cass, or Lau, yes, it would be the same officer, but otherwise, it wouldn't be a problem.
Chief, are we still in the situation where as we have shift changes, they drop them off at their house, pick them up at their house, that type of thing?
Yep, sometimes we do. And I've looked at that too, since I've come back, because that was a practice that we started long before when I was a patrolman here. There's 2 ways of looking at it. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. The best part of it is as soon as 11 o'clock comes, that officer's in the car, he's on the street, and he's working. Rather than the guy who drives in from his home, and then he's in the office and has to wait for a car or whatever if there's not enough. The 10-hour shifts with the overlaps has helped us to make sure that we're cutting down on the overtime, because now the guy at the end of his shift doesn't have to take the call, it's the new guy. And so, yeah, we're still doing the drop-off and pickup. There's a couple disadvantages to it, but nothing huge. I think we get more work out of our people by doing that than we would any other way.
I guess my concern is if we expand the residency circumference, we could end up with a real problem.
Well, that would be assuming that everyone would leave. And I don't think that's going to happen, because like I said, we got the 1 officer moving back in. This would be more for the one occasionally in the next 2 to 3 years that somebody would leave us and I'd look to hire one. And then you work to try and bring them in. I've got one that lives outside of town now and probably wouldn't fall under the 5-mile rule anyway. But he drives in every morning, and he's always been on time. And that's the other thing that we've told him, and we would tell anybody else, is if you don't live in town, you're not getting picked up, be to work on time every time. I don't care about snowstorm, I don't care about blizzard. If you can't make it, that's on you. And it's never been an issue. Anything else? I thank you, and I'll
Thanks,
see you
Chief.
next week.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, next is Parks and Recreation, and Bob is unavailable, but I'm sure Al has all the details.
Bob would be happy to share that with you when he next approaches. I know that they're extremely busy getting the parks ready. The complex is in full swing. They've had a couple of tournaments out there already, and so we don't see much of Bob up here either. But at this point, I think all is well. some painting at the pool that has to take place yet. I know they did some painting. I think they're gonna try and get some more done before they open it. But weather hasn't really been conducive for a lot of that stuff, so.
I see they got First Ward Park mowed, and I was out at the dog park today, and that looks terrific, so.
They are getting some of the mowing done. They've hit some of the difficult areas, and some of the prime spots, but again, they're just getting up to speed now, so.
Any word on how the tournaments did this weekend?
I haven't heard anything about this weekend's tournaments, no. I know the one last week with the starts and stops, they got it in, kind of fitting around the rain, but
Yeah.
it was a challenge. They were able to play because Bob went out on Friday night and he got everything drug and ready to go Friday, so that even though it rained on Saturday, it dried out much faster than if they'd have left it and tried to drag it first thing Saturday morning before the game. So, Bob's planning ahead sure helped on that.
Okay, next up, are in new business, street department. We have a proposal. Brad?
Okay, so the street department would like to purchase the roller that's budgeted for 23 in the current budget with leftover funding, I'll call it.
Yeah, it's not really leftover funding. We had a drop-in sander in this year's CIP, and a vibratory roller in next year's. Brad wants to just switch those two around. We don't do that without coming to the council. The dollar amounts are amazingly similar. One's 25,000, which is in the CIP. This roller is coming in at about 22,000. So we're in the same ballpark. We would just ask for the council's blessing to,
You still have a functional sander for next year before you can purchase one? Is this one?
We have two functional sanders right now, and we have a brand-new truck with a sander in it coming, hopefully, it should have been here July 1st, but hopefully it'll be here by December, they say, January at the latest, but. So, and then, yeah, the other sander that we have that would be replaced is still very much functional. It's just kind of, I believe, went for that for backup in case, because they are old sanders.
Now, the width on these is only like 3 foot wide? the
Yeah.
mowers? Whereabouts are they gonna be, I mean, where are you gonna use them?
It's for the main reason is for all the asphalt patching that we're gonna take over now for water leaks and any other asphalt instead of
Are you gonna
contract.
put down the hot mix and?
Yeah, we're gonna do all that now on our own, unless it's too large of a project. And then the base of regular concrete jobs, we can use it. And the edging, I mean, there's several things to use it for, but the asphalt would be the main.
Currently, we're having to contract all that in, right?
Yeah, anything that's been asphalt up till we get this roller has all been contracted.
at the mercy of their schedule.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues.
So once we get this, then, or, let's say that you got a patch on, at the pool, you can call Aspro and they'll bring down a truck whenever you want it?
We'll actually go to Waterloo or Cedar Rapids, I'm sorry, and get our load. Actually, no, we will go to Waterloo.
And then do that all
Yeah.
yourself.
If it's too big a job, we will still contract it out, but
That's
any
good, though.
of your patchwork,
I think
Yeah.
this is a great idea.
yeah, it's gonna save a lot of money, both for the water and sewer and what we do on our own.
Sounds like a good plan.
I think so.
Do we have to have this on next week's?
We'll formalize this next week. I just wanted Brad to be able to answer questions here. And again, financially, it works because we're just swapping line items in the CIP, dollar amounts match. So from that standpoint, it's really a non-issue. But this is not what the council approved in the CIP, so we want the council's permission to change that. And that's the purpose of why we're here.
I think it makes good sense.
It does to me too.
Yeah, Jim.
Thank you,
Okay,
Brad.
thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brad.
Brad. Next up is mowing nuisances. And I guess Todd's not here to discuss this, but we'll let Al.
This is just really for your information and for discussion. This shows the mowing nuisances that have been sent assessments for failure to mow. We had a conversation about snow removal. It's the same with grass. When we find property that has grass that is too tall, we notify them. If they don't mow it, we go out and we mow it for them. Then we send them a bill. If the bill is not paid within a timely manner, then they are assessed. The only ones that you see here are the ones that we had to mow and they failed to pay when we sent them a bill. So even if we've done the mowing and we send them a bill, they pay it, you'll never see it here. It's one of those things that will only show up in one of Todd's statistics that he brings to you for information. These are the people that have had trouble paying their bill timely. But you can see that there's a variety of properties each year. They're all over town, but we do have some repeat offenders, and we have some that are new every time. So it's a variety.
So when he gives them that notice, how much time do they have to have it mowed before the city goes and does it?
That'll vary a little bit. I mean, he's got I think he usually gives them a week, but they have, is it going to rain? Is it, what is the weather doing? If they contact him, he can give them more time if they're trying to work with him. If it's somebody that just ignores him and it's a repeat offender, they probably get less time every time he provides a notice because they're just not performing.
Doesn't he just have to give the notice once a year to people?
We put the notice out there, we published the notice in the newspaper. That covers our requirement. Now, when he goes about and he finds it, he will put a door hanger on or notify them as well, as a courtesy. By law, we're not required to do it, but it's the right thing to do. And then if they fail to do it, then we have to work with the Parks Department, fit it into their schedule to have somebody actually have the time to go out and mow, because you know that they're not blessed with an abundance of time either. So there's a lot of things that have to come together before we get out there and actually do the mowing. But when we mow, they get billed accordingly.
Where's the, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Where's this property at, the USDA property? It just shows the parcel number. Is that out by,
I kind of wondered about that too.
Well, there's a couple of USDA properties.
both the same,
It's the same.
both the same,
They're-
all three of them are the same PO box? And the
Well,
same
that's-
parcel number?
That's the mailing address. If you scroll over on the spreadsheet, it does tell you the actual
Oh, okay.
property address.
200 block of Third Street, I think.
That's the most frequent one.
And
Yeah.
somebody else is mowing that this year, so we can take that off our list.
That would be nice.
It's already been mowed twice.
That's awesome. I will say, one of the things, as citizens and council members, if you see a property that is in violation, jot down the address and send it to Todd and let him look into it. Because I'm sure there's properties he doesn't get to drive by all the time, so.
Speaking of jotting down, I got 3 pages here for somebody that handed it to me and wants Todd to have it. And these are about nuisance properties, and I think some things have behind what it is, but I drove past the majority of them, and they need cleaned up. We got citywide cleanup coming June 11th, and get these junked places cleaned up to make our town look better.
Oh, and I will be able to be there June 11th. They changed their reception to the 18th. So, TV land, here I come.
June 11th is cleanup.
Yeah.
I will come back to the cleanup here before we leave tonight, but again, this is just for your information on the mowing properties, so that you're aware that, and again, this goes back to 2014, just showing kind of where we've been with the properties.
Any other discussion on the nuisance? Then we'll go to 6th Avenue Southwest Trail Project update.
All right, good evening. Happy to report that the 6th Avenue Southwest Trail project is complete. Contractor completed the work here just within the last several days. We've only had a few dry days in the last several days, and they were able to get it completed. So we have a pay application that'll be coming to the council for consideration at next week's meeting. It is for, there's about $20,000, don't quote me on that, about $20,000 worth of work that they've completed. If you recall, they had requested an extension last year. We got them to get the trail so that it was functional. We did assess some liquidated damages for them being over the contract date, and the council elected to give them until April 1st to get the remainder of the work completed this spring. Obviously, this spring has not been suitable to do grading and seeding, certainly before April 1st. So they did complete it before May 1st. So there will be an official request for an extension that comes as part of that final pay application. So you do still have the retainage that'll be withheld for another 30 days, but we wanted to make you aware that the work's been completed, and they did make a considered effort this spring. In fact, there were a couple times that they were going to come up and start, and we said, no, you're just going to make a bigger mess, and it's going to end up taking you longer, because they had, it just wasn't dry enough. It wasn't fit. And so we actually held them off one day and said, just wait for this next, we got more rain coming, wait for this next rain to occur, and then come back in when we've got a few days of dry weather. So so that extension is something that they'll want action on in order to close out the project, and we recommend that the council grants them until May 1st, which essentially gives them the dates that they've already taken to get the work done. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Brian, there's two questions talking about the project closeout, and I know Mark was going to double check on that strip of land behind the privacy fence. There was about 18 inches there that was not hydroseeded. I'm assuming that was at the property owner's request, and I just want to make sure that.
Okay, this is at the corner.
Right on the north end of the project,
On the west side of that fence.
on the
I
west
think
side
that
of the
was what you're talking
fence, right on the,
Okay.
and maybe it was just the way it looked from the street.
It was a combination of both at the property owner's request and as they were spraying the hydro mulch, which is the green material that you saw. We didn't want them to get very close to that fence or behind it to avoid spraying the fence with some overspray.
Right.
We got a nice white fence there for the property owner, and we didn't want to get green hydro mulch sprayed on it. So that area was hand seeded
Oh.
with the grass seed. It just was not hydro mulched.
Okay, and I just
Yep.
want to make sure that we address the property owner's concern there
Yep.
with that. That was the only issue. And then I was asked,
Makes sense as to why it looked different then.
absolutely, and I'm good with that. I just
Yep.
don't want to walk away and
Yeah,
leave him hanging
absolutely.
either, so.
Absolutely.
And then at the south end of the project where the trail stops and turns left across 6th Avenue, there's a concern about the way they're leaving the end of that trail. Is there a hazard there with the way the property drops away from the trail?
There's a drainage thing there, so if, like, say a little kid was riding something or running, there's nothing to stop them there at the end of the cement. And there's a drop-off probably a foot before you get to that drainage thing, and then there's,
Okay.
it doesn't look finished off.
There's,
It doesn't look real safe.
Okay, so we could have them, put on an apron or something like that. We could have them perform some additional work there if you'd like them to put on an apron and basically taper that out further. I think the clear zone there is supposed to be 2 feet beyond the edge of the trail, so we couldn't put any type of barrier. If you're thinking of a barrier to keep somebody from going off the end, I don't know. I'd have to give that some thought. I
Metal
guess,
rail?
Deb.
It would all be the
Yeah,
like
so-
sidewalks, all it would be.
I didn't even notice it. I probably walked that thing 10 or 15,
It's,
more than that.
yeah, it's not a,
Does it just need backfilled?
Well, I don't
there's a
think we,
drainage, and the drainage looks like it's dropped down probably a foot.
There's a culvert there that
Yes.
takes
Yeah.
drainage from that.
So you
ditch
want that
comes
there,
from-
but
From south to north. I'd have to take another look at it, Deb, in order to,
and I'm not sure that this would be something we have to go back to the contractor for, but it's not in the design to do anything there, and that was, the first question. So maybe it's something that we want to take a look at, separate even from the contractor.
yeah, if there's some shaping or something that we need to do in addition to what
Well-
was done there, it should.
I'm not convinced it's.
Seated though, I'm assuming it's been,
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a contour or a shaping issue as much as maybe some kind of a barrier or a fence, a
Corral.
panel, something so that somebody doesn't, and to Deb's point, if a child is riding along there, not paying attention and rides off the end of it, have we created a liability?
yeah,
Or is it
the only
something that
thing-
maybe the street and parks department could work together on and come up with a solution for it?
Right. I just don't want to create a greater hazard by good intentions than what we
Yeah.
have there. So
Yeah.
if we're all looking at it
I guess
with
I
an
never
open
saw a
mind.
hazard. I mean, I've used it probably
take a look, because it's a
every 2 or
hazard.
3 days since it's been in.
And that might be
I-
to my,
We'll see if you fall, and then we'll.
I mean, that's where the stop sign, that small stop sign's at. It's
Yeah, I
just
know.
There is, I was
I know
gonna say, I was
exactly
trying to
what
But
visualize.
if you go
There is a-
straight off the cement, which I'm saying a little kid on a riding toy or something, how many little kids do you see riding ahead of their parents? And
Yeah,
it's gonna go right off of it. A rail would be
Do that
looks like
again.
the perfect solution, because otherwise you're covering that drainage system. I mean, you don't wanna,
Well, that's what my concern
you want that
would
to
be.
be there, but
I don't
that,
wanna
the
see
drainage system's a foot drop off.
well, to your point, Brian, and for the council, I would recommend that we approve the time extension. They, as we said last fall, when this came up, our concern was how quickly they could get in there, and this year has not been ideal for them. So the fact that it's done, I think they've been, judicial in getting to it, and
Yep.
I would recommend that as a part of our approval next Monday.
No, we held back, what, 5,000 from them last year for not getting there and getting the job done? They're not
that's right.
getting that money in this,
no,
They
that
think.
decision's been made.
Okay.
Yep, and that will reside as a credit on the project. I think the contract amount was 320,000, and it came up to 308,000 is the total final cost of the project.
Yeah, we just don't want to charge them any additional working day penalties.
Yes.
Which is,
Yeah.
we reserve the right to do that this spring if they didn't come in and get the work done.
That's
They made a good faith effort.
They
it.
did.
Very
this
good.
year they did, yeah.
Yes. Well, they worked pretty well while they were here last year, and. I
When
think
they
that was-
finally got here.
Right.
Agreed.
So, anyway, I think we can address that on Monday as well, Brian, if you think it's appropriate.
Any other questions on? All right, very good.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, the American Recovery Plan Act Fund discussion.
Well, we have a lot of information there for your review. The one thing I did want to point out, just so you don't think I've completely lost my mind, the ARP presentation that I included was not for Independence. It was Marshalltown. It was intentional because I thought that they did a nice job of showing what types of things other people were doing. They used the Pulco survey like we did, and I wanted you to see what other people were thinking, just as a way to expand our perspective a little bit. So I apologize for not making that more clearly defined. But in the overall project list, without being judgmental in any way, the top of the list, we have two things that we have funded already, the survey and the EMS subsidy for 2 years. And you approved the resolution for that at the last council meeting.
Now, in the event that they have a countywide election or countywide election for the emergency,
If we've got another way to cover year 2 of that, or a portion of year 2 of that, that's great, that frees it up. Right now, what we know today, we don't have that available. So I have to approach this from the standpoint of, these funds are committed.
right,
We have until 2024, December of 2024 to commit it, and December of '26 to spend it. So we're not in a crisis to do it. I just don't want to mislead you by thinking there might be money that doesn't exist. So we're showing the money as being spent currently on the EMS subsidy. Next is the requests that we received. And Heartland Acres lost revenue, roughly 66,000. Tourism has a combination of lost revenue and staffing. I put in 30,000. They have, and it's attached here, their request shows a lot of different things that they would like to do, but I thought 30,000 was the easiest number that I could attach to here for your consideration. Kidsville had some COVID-related expenses at $5,218. Again, another eligible expense. And Celebration Committee had an estimated $40,000 of lost revenue because in 2020, there was no event at all. They had zero. And so it was 100% washout on that one for them.
Is there anything about where profit or nonprofit gets money?
Not in this, the way the final rule came out in a way that allows us to do either one.
well,
Now-
in Heartland, when they've gotten their revenue from the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program,
They might have, although they don't have a lot of employees. It's mostly volunteer run out there, so that would not help.
right, but
them.
they can show the, even if they have a small TO or low employees, they can show what their coverage is and what their expected,
But not
returns
lost,
are.
but not lost revenue, correct?
That'd be assuming they applied for it.
Correct. And again, I have not passed any judgment. I'm showing you just the way it came in with the best assumptions that I can provide for your information. Now, we also had a list of potential projects that have come up. Some of these have been talked about pretty openly, others have been suggested, and I'm just putting everything out in front of you. An inclusive park with an estimate of 100,000, talking with Bob. We haven't spent any time on these projects putting a lot more than just an estimate together, so that's what you're seeing. First Street West Corridor Study, industry standard, if you want to call it that, just kind of a rough number to do a corridor study from basically the east side of the Wapsie Bridge out to the west end of town, and a green space study for our parks and open space in town. And I've combined those two together because a lot of the public input and visioning would, or could theoretically happen together to be more efficient, but they don't have to be. That was just a number that we have for those two if we did them in conjunction with each other.
I'd like to propose one that involves both green space and inclusive park. After conversations with many, many people around my area down there, Ole has that area for sale, the 11.2 acres. And I've spoken with Steve Ole, and they would be willing to sell at a reasonable price. And we talked about the west edge, so it bordered the street. But then another person I spoke with talked about 4 acres, for example, in the middle, and then they could develop the outside ones with housing along the parks, which is very, very attractive for a lot of families.
That would tie into, well, the Southwest Park down by the pond area. We have a half acre of green space that we already own
Behind that,
to the west of the pond.
I know, I went down there today and walked that because I read this, but How accessible is that for if we put an inclusive park down there?
We did not look at an inclusive park. The inclusive park was something that we had looked at without identifying a specific location. The courthouse, or First Ward Park being the most central in the community, was the one that kind of jumped out at us as we were talking. No decisions have been made. We're not at that point. So I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying these are just projects that we're throwing out there as a discussion point. The inclusive park not being cited in a specific location yet. But the Southwest Pond area, that would primarily be could it be inclusive? Yes, but it would be a very small one. We identified that. Or it might be just a neighborhood park, because we don't have a park in the Southwest right now, which would probably be more practical than trying to do an inclusive park down there in the Southwest.
We've got that one park, it's just not that far down, but we've got one over there.
Yeah, it's a mile, it's 1.1 miles from the Enterprise Drive, Third Ward Park.
Third Ward, yes.
One of the things on inclusive park, it would have to have good parking accessibility, because you'd be
Yes.
looking at handicapped people possibly that would need
Courthouse
good
park has
access,
got pretty good.
very good
basically
parking.
Off-road parking on two sides.
Yeah.
Right. We did look at an inclusive ball field. I'm going to tell you that since we put this together, that's off the table. Bob got some pricing for that, and that's probably beyond what we really have the funds to put into it. Great idea, but I don't think it's the best use. We don't get the most mileage out of it for all of our community. We also have tourism. The tourism $50,000 grant match is a little bit different because their concept is to look at a countywide application to the state tourism fund. There's money, I think it's $100 million that the state is putting out for 4 different categories of tourism. And if we take a look at a historic Highway 20 program from Winthrop, Independence, and Jessup, each community putting in something and then getting funds through the state. The total project, again, ballpark, just with what we know, about $300,000 worth of project. Our contribution, ballpark 50,000. Jessup and Winthrop having smaller projects and a smaller contribution. But again, leveraging our ARPA funds to generate state tourism grant.
How would that benefit us with that tourism grant? I mean, what would be done in Independence or?
Well, they're looking at Bremer Park and the mill, kind of that area right in the center of town. Excuse me. Doing something that would be a draw as you come through Historic Highway 20. Likewise, in Winthrop and Jessup, and I won't speak for their communities, but having something that they would have on Highway 20 that would be a draw in their community, a roadside park, a rest area type of thing, I don't know, but for Independence, it would draw to the downtown, the mill, Bremer Park. Can we do something to enhance that as a tourism draw?
I think one of the things they looked at was somehow illuminating the bridge and the mill downtown for at night to draw more attention to it.
That was included in here. If we did this tourism match, that would all be a part of
Musco lighting?
the Musco lighting proposal. All of that would be in that tourism grant, lighting the mill, lighting the bridge, Bremer Park, kind of a grand presentation in our downtown. And I think it would help our downtown. But while it is eligible for 100% funding through the state, it is competitive, and we would have to probably do some kind of a match in order to be competitive statewide. The last project that I have on here is a comprehensive stormwater study, looking at, we've talked about stormwater and the importance of doing something, but doing a community-wide study with modeling. Brian can answer that question better than I can, but I think $100,000 is kind of a ballpark of doing something that comprehensive.
But haven't we done 2 or 3 already, the studies? I mean, with the 10th
We've-
Street and,
We've done one study that was in the northeast quadrant, kind of in this area up here, very isolated. We have not done a comprehensive community-wide stormwater study, and we have not done the modeling that goes with it.
But
In
we
other
know where
words-
the water issues are
yeah,
at.
that's right.
So you already
Could
spent
we spend part of the
toward the project.
money on fixing the problem that we know exists?
Well, part of the issue that we have there is the stormwater utility, putting that money into, we've talked about the stormwater system pipe, if you will. Brad, help me out, is that on 8th or 9th? Between them? Okay, where we've got the collapsed pipe that we have to fix, and that's on our agenda for this summer.
But like on 10th, the Creamery Street, our stormwater utility isn't sufficient yet because it's not that old to fix that. But I mean, can we use some of the money from this to alleviate that issue? And, I mean, that would be like the first strike at what we need to do for stormwater. And I mean, that street, that area is, as far as tourism goes, that area is a pretty strong area because there's a lot of fishermen. I can't believe, riding bikes down around there, how many I've seen down on the river already this year. A lot of boats and a lot of pontoons.
We have, no, we know where there's water on 10th, 11th, 12th. We also have it on 9th Avenue Southwest.
Not as bad as 10th.
Some of that gets solved though when we put the new road in there? That's the time to work on that, isn't it?
Well, again, I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. The issue that we have with the comprehensive stormwater study is if I fix it in one place, am I creating issues upstream or am I creating issues downstream? And we don't know that if we don't look at it comprehensively. Now, we can go out and put a lot of Band-Aids in for $100,000. I agree with you, Mike, but that's what they are, is Band-Aids. I don't know that we have a comprehensive review of what this should be. Every time Brian and the folks bring us a street project, we have to look at a stormwater system. What do we do with it? But now we're doing Band-Aids every step of the way. We don't take a look at the whole system comprehensively.
Well, and it's like up around the Creamery. If we figured out a way to shoot that water to the river faster and easier, are we just making another bigger problem at the river for flooding? Because it's getting all this additional water that quickly. So it's a ripple effect of what all it happens. It's like
And that's my only concern. I don't disagree with you, Mike, and I think our stormwater utility should be able to address some of these issues that we're talking about, but I don't think that we've really addressed the entire stormwater issue if we don't look at the whole system.
And I agree with you, John, but the thing is, I mean, that's gotta be the worst flooded place, and it's been the worst flooded place in town
40
probably
years.
since we were riding
We used to
bikes
play
back
in that when
Yeah.
it rained.
Yeah.
It was our pool for a
So-
couple hours.
But I guess my concern would be, we fix that, but then does that push the problem somewhere else in the city? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the
Without
concern.
knowing?
Without, exactly.
That water's always gonna go to the river. That's where it's gonna go, no matter.
But then
if you fix
from
it
the
today or
river-
100 years from today.
I mean, I
The goal
know
is to
that-
try and slow it down.
yeah.
And I guess the only thing I would offer on that is the comprehensive study that we did do in the Northeast included the 2 basins that contribute to the problem at 12th and the problem at 10th. And so there are some design alternatives there. Most of the flooding that happens on the Wapsipinicon actually comes after the rain falls here. And so getting the localized flooding that we see on 12th and on 10th to the river doesn't really compound, because our problems with the river coming up is from Crane Creek and upper Wapsie, the rain that falls, in New Hampton and Fayette and everything, because as you guys know, because we've all lived through a number of them, we get the rainfall here, and the river really doesn't come up right away. And then it's usually Okay, watch your
12 hours.
clock.
Yeah.
And yeah, so here comes the problem from upstream, because the Wapsipinicon watershed is long and narrow. And so those problems that we see down at the river has to do with water that falls north of us. It doesn't have to do with water that necessarily falls here historically, so.
Watch the gauge in Trapola, and
That's right,
guess
you
for
got
about
it. So you
16
guys-
hours
you guys know
later,
this
you're gonna
stuff.
have it here.
So would this comprehensive stormwater study do anything to help that flooding issue that comes up every
Well, I think
25 years?
I think you have a study that already gives you some solutions, and that's probably what Mike is alluding
It
to,
is.
is that you've already spent some money to study it, but to Al's point, you haven't looked at all of the other areas. We have done some studies south and taken care of some at Cy and Charlie's. We've looked at First Street West and installed a pipe along the west side of what was middle school, is now West Elementary, to cut that water off, so we've got less flooding going on at the car wash there by Spahn and Rose, so that we don't see that anymore, where it used to flood at Butterfields and some of those locations. So those kinds of things have been done, and like we've talked about, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but every time we talk about stormwater, there's kind of two approaches. Do we look at these individual isolated areas where we know the problems are and focus our effort on fixing those problems, or do you spend money on a study that looks at the whole town? And, that's a decision for you guys to make. We're willing to help with whichever direction the council, decides that they want to go.
And I think the issue is, we don't have to do one or the other. We're in a position right now where I think we have an opportunity to address the area in the northeast here that we know is an issue. We have a way to start that process. But we also have a chance to do it, take a look at our community comprehensively. What you've seen here on this list, and that really compiles the list that we put together, it gives us a chance to use one-time money in a way that is going to have a maximum impact for the community. Things that we are going to struggle with finding or funding otherwise. So high-impact dollars with one-time money. This was coincidental. I wish I could take credit for it, but by putting this list together with what we have already spent, with the requests we received and the projects that we put together, with only estimates. I want to emphasize that. I only have estimates on that. We haven't put any time into it, or meaningful time, but we're basically within $5,000 of what the ARPA funds available to the city would total.
Is that for both years?
Yes. So, I mean, does it work? Yes. Now, on the projects that we're proposing, I want to emphasize that before the council gives us the blessing to look at it, they're only going to be estimates. They are our best guess, and I don't want to suggest anything more than that. The inclusive park might be 70,000 instead of 100,000. We're
After
going.
looking at it, calling some friends at you and I, it's gonna exceed 100,000, to be quite honest.
Well, it depends. I mean, we can make it as big as we want or go as far as we want with it. I
The
agree.
standard size and the one that's accepted by Joe for Journal of Physical Education and Recreation.
And we went through with what other communities have put into place and kind of what their estimates were, or their expenditures were. So, again, just a number to give you an idea of the framework that you should be thinking of for these dollars.
So my comment to that is I'd much rather see us spend the money, and I'm not one for studies in particular, but if we're gonna spend money, like you said, utilize that money that's being provided to us to make things better. I'd much rather see us spend money to benefit a lot more of the town than if I'm gonna use 12th Street as the Creamery as an example, where we're looking at one rental residence in that particular area. I mean, a comprehensive study, or let's say it's 40,000 of that 100,000, is gonna cover a lot more of our residents and citizens to do that than to fix that.
But what do
particular
those
problem.
businesses up there bring to our community? They have been flooded for 20-plus years. And we keep saying, we're gonna do something to help you out here,
Yeah.
And I also think that
but
in that.
we haven't.
I don't think you're wrong there, Deb, but they also keep increasing their concrete footprint without changing the infrastructure that gets rid of the drainage. So there's a little bit of liability in that too, responsibility from their standpoint. I don't want to downplay them at all. I think the creamery is great for our community. Wouldn't dispute that a bit. But as they grow, add more buildings, they're adding more roof structure, more parking structure. There's 2 parking lots that have now been added over there that weren't there before. There's a lot of runoff right there in that particular area for that short area.
But again, the council heard from the Nielsen's previously, and we talked about using stormwater utility funds. Now, we've had that in place for not quite a year yet. We're generating a revenue that we have for this specifically. And so I don't think it's an either or. I mean, that's the beauty of this right now, is I think we have an opportunity to address both concerns. And to not take away from their issue, we have to do something there. I absolutely agree. But for tonight's conversation, we're talking about the ARPA funds that we have available to us and how do we invest that in our community. And I guess my biggest concern is, what are those things, one-time money? I don't think that we'll see this again in any of our lifetimes.
I actually hope not.
What can we do that will be impactful for our community?
Well,
That's the approach that I brought to it.
just in reference to the stormwater study we did do up along 10th and 12th, that area, we estimated just to do wasn't it like 1.3 million
On 10th, yes.
to try and alleviate?
Those are pretty accurate.
So this 100,000 wouldn't even touch anything as far as remedy.
Yeah, the one on
But
12th is.
by
much
doing
less
a
expensive.
study, we could figure out where we have to prioritize our stormwater funds down the road.
That was
Because
my-
that $100,000 is not gonna fix anything.
Correct.
That's the only point I want to try to
What
make.
would it cost on 12th, where the problem is?
Our estimates for 12th was about 250,000, 240,000. And that actually, one of the alternatives we presented in the study there has little or no impact on the street. We can do all of that outside of the footprint of the paved street there and get to the river with a larger pipe along the north side, within the city's right-of-way, so.
Part
So
of
that
the
would be a-
10th was the fact that we had to, we were affecting the street almost the entire length of that, right?
Yeah, there's really not a lot of unpaved space up there. Adjacent to the creamery is all paved, and so the improvement there would be, you'd be tearing up some hard surface in order to do any underground installation there. So yeah, the two corridors are vastly different just in that respect, the amount of paved surface and the size of the pipe. One of the alternatives there was to cut off some of that water at 8th and improve the 8th Street system. So there's kind of a 2-tier approach there that we had as far as design alternatives for the 10th Street problem. But that's, all of that stuff, we wouldn't rehash any of that if we looked at, a more comprehensive study. We would certainly utilize all of that in the stuff we've studied out by Dones and First Street West, and wouldn't redo any of that. So I think the last thing I'll add here is that the 100,000 is more than enough to take care of studying the rest of the community that we haven't already done detailed study work on.
The one thing that I'm concerned about is we can study it, but for our verbiage, I think having the stormwater modeling as well, so we see what happens at the different rain events, at the different volumes. I don't think it's enough to say, here's our pipes, and this is the size, and this is what we have, and we have some general ideas. I think the modeling is a critical piece of that, which is another layer on top of that.
Well,
And
that would
that's what-
include the modeling.
Okay,
Yep.
I just want to be really clear, I think that we want to know what happens at these different events, so you see where your greatest impact is, and when.
Yep.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
I guess for the sake of the discussion tonight, is there anything in here that the council feels does not belong on the list?
I want to find out like on the requested, what they received for PPP money. I haven't seen anything on here about, the Lee Mansion. It'd be nice if we have a chunk of money, a one-time hit like this, to provide Leanne with the kind of funding to get that up to date so it can make money. Wedding receptions, things like that.
They got money this year, didn't they, from,
Some, but not enough to finish it.
I think they did come in with a request for some.
They've asked for 10,000 last year and again this year.
But it's gonna
For
take
their-
more than that. I sat and talked to her for a while out there.
And I shared with them the same tour, the $100 million tourism grant. Is there something in there that we might be able to leverage? I don't know what that is, but my comment.
$50,000 to try to get a grant and then give Leanne part of that. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, could the Lee Mansion be part of the, I'm using this as a concept, it's not my concept, but the Highway 20 corridor from a tourism standpoint, could they fit into that? They're on Highway 20. I think that there's room for that in that concept as well, yes. Where does it fit? I don't know. I haven't worked on it to that point. The Lee Mansion could also be a standalone applicant to the tourism grant. And, do we help leverage something there? But I don't have anything back from Leanne. I did share the grant with her and asked her to look at finishing the Lee Mansion, to your point. Hey, what is it gonna take to build this out?
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it's been nickel dime, and nothing's totally done where we can utilize it, or the community can utilize it. And if we can bring a money situation there and get it done, then it can start being utilized in revenue stream.
right. But, and I agree with you, Mike. I don't have any numbers that I can put in here. I have nothing to respond to on that, but,
But with the request, I would personally like to see how much they got in the PPP first before I start, agreeing that maybe they, this would be a good a good fund.
okay?
Any other discussion?
I sure don't want to belabor it, but I'd like to have some direction so that I can take staff through where do we start? What do we spend our time bringing back to you? And again, on the Mike, I know you were talking about the requested numbers, and I appreciate that. I'm talking about the projects more specifically. Is there something that you really like, something in here that you want to take out? Where do we go with this? Because at some point, we're going to have to get you hard numbers, real numbers to substantiate what this looks like.
well, some of these, can't we just give up to a fee like the exclusive park? What we can get for 100,000 is what we get. And down the road, that could probably be built onto.
The inclusive park, that one, absolutely.
So we have until '24 to identify the uses and then '26 to spend it.
Correct.
But it's '22 now, so we've got some time.
Absolutely. The First Street West corridor study, I'm a little more concerned about, not because of the ARPA funds, but because we're talking about in '26 redoing that street. And we've identified First Street West as being an area of town that needs some attention. I know that the planning and zoning is working on it. This is something that they've talked about with the corridor study, taking a look at, not only what should it look like when we grow up, but what does the zoning look like to support whatever we want to do out in First Street West to revitalize that area?
But what is the study is the study gonna tell us you need different storefronts or different?
Oh, well, a corridor
I'm with
study
you,
is
Mike.
like,
Yeah.
What's this, study's gonna show you got a bunch of empty buildings out there, nothing going on.
Could we
Well-
decide to do the study for it?
Is it gonna give us ideas on how to
15,000
use
each?
those buildings
Well,
I don't know.
the point is what do we want First Street West to look like? I mean, it's like a comprehensive plan for that area of town. It's like what we did downtown for the downtown study that led us to the facade grants. It's the same concept of what could this be, what should this be, as we develop it out. Or do we just leave it and say that private sector will take care of themselves as we go along? We still have some rezoning to do out there because the zoning doesn't match its current use, and planning and zoning is working on that.
Well, my one concern is, we let it happen out on the southeast part of town now, where it just kind of grew without any city control over it and created a traffic nightmare. If we had put in a access road all along the east side of the highway there,
Bingo.
we wouldn't be dealing with the kind of mess we've got. And now we got another building going in between Norby's and Fairway. It's just gonna add to the confusion.
Luckily, there is an access road there.
There is, but it's still gonna be a parking
Oh,
nightmare,
it is, yeah.
because the footprint's not that much bigger than what they have where they're at.
Right. And that's gonna compound our First Street West dilemma, because we're losing the business.
But we've had to do a lot of crazy traffic things out there in the last 10 years to try and fix the growth problem.
Well, just think about that place out there in the last, you and I have been on 6 years, we started at the same time. It's amazing what has transpired.
Oh, yeah?
But I think that goes back to what we were talking about, is having a plan for these things rather than just happenstance and then.
And that's
go-
where I'm coming back. We
Should've
need to
done a
have
better
some
job of
sort of a
planning.
planning. Do we want to develop it for expanded retail? But there's got to be some reason for them to want to go out there.
To the west, you mean?
And right now, with all the traffic where the school is, there's a lot of people want to avoid that area.
Yeah.
Well, one of the issues that came up in planning and zoning, for example, if you decided you wanted to move, Mike, you could buy the old McDonald's and move in there because it's zoned to be an RC1, which is residential and commercial. So if somebody wanted to turn it into a home, under our current structure, you can't prevent that. You'd have a big play area.
I'll tell the wife that.
But I mean, that's part of what they're dealing with, and what they're wrestling with is the fact that, you know, we have this conflict in zoning, which is also really transpiring into what do we want First Street West to look like? We have some residential, we have commercial, we have some properties that just need a lot of TLC. But what can it look like? What should we push to develop out there? And that's the purpose of the corridor study.
But it's, I mean, we can do all the studies we want, but it's whoever has the money and wants to come in and do something out there that's gonna be the deciding factor. I mean, I'm with you, John, on the study. I think private enterprise is gonna say, hey, I've always wanted a family restaurant, so I'm gonna buy the Pizza Hut building, and it's got adequate parking, it's got seating, you know. I mean, that's what I envision.
Right. As long as they don't have covenants in there that prevent you from putting a restaurant in there. And that's
Oh,
what you
I'm
have
sure they
with
have
with
pre-existing,
McDonald's,
yeah.
for example, is you can't put a food service.
So if Mike bought that to live in, he couldn't have his wife cook.
That's right.
I think it just got sold.
Unless, you know, out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. From my experience, I will tell you, a corridor study in that area is the best solution to take, I shouldn't say that. It's the best next step for First Street West, as far as where do we go with it.
If we were to do a corridor study like that, would it give us some leverage on cleaning up like the abandoned Hardee's property that's been there forever and making something happen with that?
It could. More importantly, you're showing people what you want it to look like. You're giving your economic development effort a target as to who are they going to look at for that area. You give planning and zoning an idea of what the zoning has to look like to meet the goals. It really starts bringing everything back together that right now is fragmented.
But wouldn't it be common sense, for example, with the McDonald's property? It's been commercial. They tore down a historic building to make it a commercial property. So rather than residential RC1, shouldn't it just automatically be zoned commercial?
I know, I understand what you're saying. No, there's no automatic, because we have residential and commercial all the way through that corridor.
There's one house out there, four
There's
houses,
several,
the-
yeah.
four.
If I go from the Wapsie to the west edge of town, it's a pretty good mix all the way through there. And that's really the corridor that you're looking at.
From the Wapsie on, is that what you're talking about?
Right. I think that, we did the downtown study that came up to the Wapsie. I think you pick it up there and you take it out to the west edge of town if you're going to do a corridor study.
Would some of that study kind of take a look at too, I know the traffic at the school at certain times and for certain events is unreal. Would that take a look at possibly another access into that school piece?
That would not be an uncommon result of a
Because that
study
has
like
been brought
that.
up to me a lot, that possibly coming through that area, like from the bus barn back to, which I think would go through like that old Hardee's area, maybe pulling something out through there,
Hey.
had been brought to my attention previously.
And again, I think it would explore those ideas. The corridor study is not somebody coming in telling you what this has to look like. The corridor study is going to bring the community together to talk about what does the community want to see there? What would they not want to see out there? So it's the community input is a pretty significant piece of that, as it was in the downtown study.
Maybe put the inclusive park along that by the school where people could access it too. I mean, there's thoughts to that too, because there's some empty properties. And
That's
have an
potential.
indoor winter area in them.
That's right, in McDonald's building.
Where free and reduced lunches can come through that.
That's right.
Well, now we're getting off track.
Sorry. By the end of the day, that's where I go.
Well, we'll bring this back to the council. Like I said, this is what was brought to us. We'll work on the information, Mike, that you had asked for on the various entities. But this is the next step. This is what we've been waiting for at this point. You'll see that in our ARPA study, we had a lot of interest in public safety. I think the parks was well-received, as far as doing something with our open space, with our parks. And then there was a lot of discussion with assistance with property taxes and utilities. And that was part of why I showed you what other communities are doing. We haven't had any direct feedback. If I gave every household in Independence a check that $900,000 would look like, we'd buy everybody supper and that'd be about it. It doesn't go very far. But those are the things that came out of our surveys.
I do have a question about the RV park expansion. Is that still the one Bob was talking about, where he would be looking at where the old high school, that lower area is?
Yes, I'm sorry, as soon as you said that, I read right over the top of it. Yes, it is that area south of the pool, the old practice field, digging out the pond and enhancing the sledding hill, starting the infrastructure for the RV park expansion.
Yeah, that first one that's across from the Dairy Queen, wasn't that a lot of volunteer effort put into that, if I understood correctly?
That predates me, so I don't know that I can answer that.
No, that was pretty much city.
Was that city? Okay, I was thinking there was a lot of volunteer time and effort out there.
The county bulldozer, Caterpillar, was used out there to level stuff off. Because see, it was a dump over by the river at one time.
Okay.
And the VFW was where the,
Turn is,
yeah.
basically where the turn is right now.
I did go by there the other day and because I thought, do we really need to expand that? That is full.
Oh, yeah.
Bob said it's booked up for the whole season.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like shocked.
That's wonderful.
They,
I mean,
well, their seasonal sites were gone a month early this year.
Yeah, the road construction helped that, but it's been very busy for the last couple of years.
yeah.
And part of the RV park expansion is they have to dig a pond, a retention pond in there, but they would use that dirt to build up some of that area to the north of it. And it would, I think it would be a very good start. And that's another one, Deb, if we put some money to start the project. It doesn't necessarily have to finish it, but it would sure give them a big boost to get that started.
And I think there was a group that did some volunteer. I want to say that Tolles, you were involved in that way back when. I
That
don't
could
know
be.
why. I think Dan Toll was,
Okay.
involved in that. I don't know. But maybe take a look at how
Yep.
that got to be there and what money the city put into that first one. And kind of look at how we could, maybe we put some money towards it, but then there's these other groups that maybe there was a reason that they put money into it and effort into it back then.
Okay. That's all I have on this one. Unless you have other questions or,
Okay. With that, we move on to our, oh, that's a good topic, mayor vacancy.
the council has 60 days to decide what you want to do with the vacancy. I think Chris Wilgenbush put together a nice scenario here for you, and I've attached kind of a general outline of your responsibilities and options. But in short, you can appoint a mayor, or you can call for a special election. If you appoint a mayor to fill out the term, they only serve until the next general election, which would be November of '23. If you have a special election, they serve the remainder of the term, which would be November of '25. I mean,
Even
the two
if
tough.
we would appoint somebody, couldn't somebody come forth and say they want a
Contest it.
special election and
That's
They have
correct.
to get the signatures and do the groundwork for that.
Right, they, and Chris has spelled out, you have to have 15% of the votes, of all votes cast for the mayor's office in the last election, based on our size. They have 14 days from the time that you make the appointment, file the petition for a special election. Right now, if you call for a special election, the soonest that you could have it is July 12th, I think Chris said, based on blackout dates because of the primary election in June. So there's certain dates that you cannot have the city's special election. And I don't remember off the top of my head, the last election we had, what it cost us, Susan.
13,000, wasn't
No,
I don't think it was that
Seven.
much.
6 or 7.
7, I think.
Well,
I thought it was,
hold on. You-
yeah.
Give me a second, I can get in.
I won't guess. I'll let
Susie
you
will be
look.
up.
But in short, those are the choices that you have in front of you. Again, not a crisis because you do have 60 days, but it's something that the council, well, actually, you don't have to take action. If you do nothing, Susie will do it for you on the 61st day.
Thanks.
I have no problem filling in till you guys make your decision. I just don't really want to
Thank
be
you,
the
John.
full-time mayor. I like my council seat.
Until you get board of supervisors. Until you get the board of supervisors.
So,
Yeah.
the regular election cost us $2,417.76. The special election cost us $2,959.48.
So $3,000 for the special election would be a
Oh, I thought it was so much more.
best-case scenario.
It was just
If,
70 grand.
well, it saves us quite a bit of money if we can do it in one polling location with one ballot, which for a mayor's seat, we could.
Yeah,
At
That's
the
why the at-large.
at-large seat, we
Yeah.
could for that reason. If we ran into a place where we had to have multiple polling stations, then we're closer to that 6,000 or 7,000.
Yeah.
Also, just as a note, if the earliest special election would be July 12th, that would be next fiscal year, so it wouldn't impact anything for this year, so.
Oh, yeah, through July.
So you don't have to do
No,
Amend the amendment?
amendment?
nope, I don't have to amend the amendment. It's next fiscal year. So, and that was a thought for anybody. It's next year's money, so.
What's everybody's feelings right now?
So if we wouldn't appoint anybody, when's the earliest anybody can take papers out? They-
Just guessing without doing the calendar count, I think it'd be somewhere around the 1st of June. Early June, I would say. But I'd have to go back and do all
Special election would be
that.
the way to go, that's my opinion.
It'll
I
probably turn
agree.
into that anyway.
Pardon?
It'll probably turn into that anyway.
Yeah.
It's the fairest.
Well, Jen, we can appoint you.
No,
You don't have to
no,
run.
No. Go ahead, Al.
Are you comfortable with this being on the agenda for Monday night as a topic, or do you want some more time to ponder it?
I could, Monday, I'd be fine with
Yeah.
that.
I don't see any reason that we should put it off any longer than that.
I know July 12th is a ways out, but I think the sooner that you make a decision, give some clarity, the better for the community as well as for our body here. So,
Well, and then we'd be able to get answers faster from Chris on how soon we could take papers out to
Right.
run and that type of thing.
yeah, she's got a fair amount of work to do on this as well, so giving her that idea, I think will help her if that's the way you want to go. So we'll have it on Monday's agenda for official action. You will have to declare the vacancy. It seems pretty obvious, but you have to declare the vacancy and call for your solution. If it's a special election, then it's kind of all in one fell swoop, so. All right?
Very good. Next item is KCRG, Our Town. Al and I met with the Chamber and Economic Development and several other members of the community in a meeting last week with KCRG. They're putting together a feature on our City of Independence. They did this several years ago, and they're going to be coming around doing another one on us. And they're going to plan on being here the early part of June to do some preliminary interviews and filming around the city. And then they'll be here over the 4th of July to do a feature from down in the park and I think covering the parade and everything else. But it's going to be a unique opportunity for the city.
Oh, I had a question today from several people. Is the parade route going to be like the old parade route? Or is it going to be like last year?
The parade route for this year, Mike?
Yeah.
The parade route for this year will be the same as historically it has been, because Highway 150 is detoured right now.
Yep.
So therefore, I don't even have to pull a permit to allow the parade. So it'll start on 4th Avenue and go down to 2nd Avenue and then up to the fairgrounds.
All the way down to First Street.
First Street, from 4th Avenue, First Street to 2nd Avenue, 2nd Avenue to the fairgrounds, as it has been historically. So we haven't had to get a
Hopefully
permit.
you're watching here, folks, so you can-
Yeah, and that was after consultation with the chamber, and then also with the Department of Transportation out of Dyersville with the engineers over there, and we do not have to get a permit. Next year, we'll have to get a permit and see where it falls, whether they'll do that or not, but this year, we're good to go back to the normal way.
sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Dave.
Concerning KCRG, this is something that Bob had been working on and had put together with KCRG, and we did follow through and meet with them. I do have a copy of a form that, if you've got ideas for stories that you would like them to cover through their Our Town presentation, they would love to have any feedback that you have or ideas that you have for them to work on. So, pretty interesting opportunity for us in our community. The projects that we have, all the things that we have going on, I think we have a lot to be proud of, so.
Well, that's a good segment to the our town segment. That's,
They'll hit some of the businesses too, won't they?
I believe so, yes. I'm sure that with the Our Town segment, that they'll be selling advertising opportunities for local businesses, and they do that pretty consistently. So.
We did bring up a lot of the things with the new businesses in town that have been taken over by younger entrepreneurs that are jumping in and replacing older businesses, which would be a great storyline about how Independence is growing and changing. And if you think back, what was it 2016, they said they were here last time? So in 6 years, our community's changed a lot. And I think it'll be real evident for them as they move around town to see all the different things that have happened and to talk to some of these new business owners and see how things are going in Independence. And a great opportunity for some advertising, too. Okay, that's everything. I guess council topics are the next item up for bid. I'd started with Jen last week, so I'll go to Catherine this time.
I don't have anything this week.
Okay. Mike?
I had a complaint from a constituent that lives up by the large segment of public housing behind the hospital. Cats are overrunning the area.
I will ask,
There are quite a few in that neighborhood.
Again,
Yeah, that's not by you. so
Yeah,
it's
there's
not
quite a
by-
few.
I think Todd's got a lot of them out there.
I know he's working in that area, but I'll remind him.
Thank you, I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and he noted that one of the problems is that there are 2 or 3 individuals that are feeding, keeping them around.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
It's been an ongoing problem.
And if you feed them, the problem will grow.
Well, and I think that they do a good job of getting them trapped and neutered, spayed, and releasing them again. So they're not gonna go away, they're just not gonna.
Right.
Multiply.
They're trying. Brand?
Nothing at this time.
Jen?
I have nothing.
Tom?
would it be a good time to update the council on what's going on with me? Or should I wait until after?
I would probably wait till after.
Okay. Nothing.
Okay. Deb?
Just remember everywhere, the citywide cleanup coming June 11th, so we
Oh,
can get
what are
things
the
cleaned
hours
up.
for that? I was
I'm-
gonna put that in my calendar.
I am so glad you asked.
There's a flyer
There-
there, right?
There's flyers out, you can get them already.
We do have flyers out, Facebook, website. A couple of changes this year. The website cleanup, or the electronic waste cleanup will be at River's Edge for TVs and electronics from 7 to 11. We are not collecting appliances or scrap metal at River's Edge this year. It goes straight to Treniers from 8 to 11:30. What we ran into is Treniers was bringing the roll-offs into town. People would bring them to us. We'd take them out of trucks, put them into roll-offs.
A lot of handwork.
We're handling it multiple times, and we about wore out some volunteers over the last 5 years. So we're going to try this.
They're gonna go to Treniers?
Straight to
It's
Treniers.
on the Bethel Road,
Oh,
It-
okay.
north of
Don't know that I've ever
It's,
been there.
what, 5 miles north on Nathan Bethel Road. Take it straight to them. If you've got scrap metal, they pay for it. Appliances, they do not, but they will accept them out there. So we're just going to not be the middleman for that this year and see how that works. Tires from 8 to 11 at Cy and Charlie's. It is shred day at the Falcon Civic Center from 9 to noon, I believe it is. I have to look at the flyer. And if you have curbside pickup, or you have things that you want Waste Management to come and pick up, call ahead and schedule it. They'll come to your curb and pick it up. You are limited to 2 yards of waste at the curb. We've had some issues with people putting out there as much as 5 or 6 yards of waste. We have to keep it to basically a trailer load or, 2 yards of waste on the curbside.
Or they'll get charged more.
Well, that's what they've said. I don't know that they've done it, but they've been pretty accommodating to this point. But they took time to call me and say, we have an issue. And so if you have things that you want to take to the transfer station will be open. If you have household hazardous waste, you can go to the county household site Monday through Friday and dispose of that. We don't have a good mechanism for doing it through the city.
Is 2 yards 2 linear yards or tall, or how do you judge 2 yards?
Well, I think I was asked the same question. I was trying to, as a reference, what are our green waste management yardie is what we call my household.
96.
Well, that's 96 gallons.
I didn't know if they considered that.
I think if you pondered a pickup bed, not heaped, but
Right.
a pickup bed filled with waste, that would be pretty close to what you're allowed.
Approximately, okay.
Okay.
Well, that's quite a bit to pick up. That's a pretty good deal for them.
Oh, it is. And then the folks that take it to the transfer station, they're allowed 1 trip, not 4 trips. The one difference being, we've had people, and Deb, I know you've been involved in helping people taking things out there. We would like to know about those folks ahead of time so that we can work with Waste Management. Deb, if you were to be doing that, to tell them, this is
That
who's,
list of people she gave you,
yeah.
maybe?
So that
Well-
truck, that
This is a little different, but
red truck guy?
if Fred Miller were to be going around and doing cleanup, helping people clean up properties, we want to know that ahead of time so that we can smooth that over with Waste Management before they call us and say, hey, we've got one guy that made 8 trips. You know.
Can't get 8 trips in.
Not enough time.
Well,
I see, no, we're cutting back if we're only going, what, 8 to 11 for electronic?
7 to 11 for
I
electronic.
guess 4 hours, yeah.
That's what we did the last couple of years, yes. We do have a different company this year. They gave us a pretty good price. They asked if they could try it. For us, it's the same price, so we'll see how that goes. But they're bringing a semi, and,
I don't want to be lifting anything up anyways.
no, they,
Come on, Mike.
oh, Brad left. Brad's taking care of that for you.
So tires, when you say about, letting these people know ahead of time, the guy that comes in with almost 70 tires on a pickup,
Wait,
but has 12 names,
tires.
boys, let him through.
Tires are the most expensive item that the city pays for. We have talked about limiting it. It's supposed to be 4 tires per household,
No.
or 12.
12. It's
12 per
12
house.
tires per
I'm
household.
sorry, thank you.
But you do have people that borrow their neighbor's address to get rid of their hoard, so.
Yeah, that many times.
How do we prevent that?
I think we need to tell him this is that.
But you need to tell them ahead of time. You can't wait till this guy's got 70 tires. And then, I finally figured out last year how he gets back so fast, because he's got 2 red pickups. And he has them loaded the night before, then he is able to get back and get them loaded again. Last year, he only brought the 2 red ones in, and that was it, though. They didn't go back and get them refilled.
I just
But
said,
We would ask you to be respectful because it's the taxpayers that are paying for this. And, it's coming out of our coffers, so. It's a
that's where they
service to the
get it. They
community.
say, well, I pay taxes, so.
Well, I don't take tires down there, but my taxes are paying for it. I mean, that would be the argument. And look, it's a cleanup, it's good for the community, it's been fantastic the last 6 years. I think we've made a lot of difference there.
Some of these we don't take are gonna probably end up in a ditch somewhere.
Right.
But
So it's-
unfortunately, it's an
It's
alternative.
a catch-22 whether you take them or not.
Got to start making roads out of them.
I just wonder when they're gonna,
Playground stuff.
Yeah.
what are
I've
the
been
big
to some
free
places.
Steel bolt.
TV's gonna be dead. What are they gonna be dead?
Should be done this year, shouldn't they?
We said that last year and the year before.
Those tall ones, those,
Those heavy ones, they're still
Monster.
in some people's homes.
So what do we need for workers? Do you have that going
Uh,
on?
We'll need at least 1 person at Cyan Charlie's. I need at least 3 at River's Edge for electronics.
I'll be there.
And 1 or 2 for the shred. So,
I'll take over from Mayor Hill
I'll
with
be
the
tires
shred.
unless you,
Yeah, because I was
only
gonna
one
say,
person.
yeah, we're gonna be one short there.
He's the one taking
there's
notes.
only one person for tires. You got somebody else for tires? Usually there's two of us out there.
I don't have anybody yet. Do you want to go out there?
I've been doing
For
it.
tires,
Yeah.
I can do it too.
It is easier to have two people for tires.
Yeah, it is really.
So what do you gotta do?
Count the tires and write down, get all these addresses.
So I will need 2 more for electronics.
I'll put me down now.
In tires, it's just almost nonstop
Well,
through
I
there.
can help with the tires too if you want. Would 3 people be too many, one get in the way?
Yeah,
I mean,
two's good.
two works.
2 works okay? Okay.
You do the shred.
I'll do the shred. I do that all the time.
Yeah, but this is a fun shredder.
Oh.
It's big.
Oh, okay. Does it take the staples so I don't have to pull all those?
Nope.
Yeah.
You pretty much, you fill up a box,
Yeah.
they take it,
Rebar or
everything's
whatever
gone.
else might be in there, it's gonna chump it up.
All right. I appreciate it. June 11th, and we'll talk about it again before then, but
Okay, so I'm doing.
we'll just get the word out.
And I used to take flyers and hand them out to people in my ward. And other people too, but.
Chief, we already let you go once. Do you have anything else?
Something kind of came up, and I want to ask the question.
Huh.
I've talked to Todd about this in the past. Our city ordinance currently allows 20 animals per residence. And that is
Wow,
just
that's a lot.
that's a lot of animals.
It's fish, that doesn't seem to be a problem.
Well, if it's fish, but one of the things we talked about is trying to cut that down to a more reasonable, and I've surveyed all around, and nobody has 20 animals. So I wonder if the council would entertain if I came up with something and brought it to look at that and change our ordinance on that.
It would be worth looking
Kind of
into.
an accordion, or it's
I know we
a
addressed this
mill.
one other time, though.
We did, but didn't the 20 get somewhere because of
Puppies.
kittens or puppies?
Well, what we can do with that is if you're a licensed breeder, we can actually build that in to the ordinance as many cities do. So if you decide you're going to have that, and even if you're not a licensed breeder, you have X amount of time to get rid of those to bring you back into compliance. To be quite honest with you, it's not people who have litters of dogs and cats that are a problem. It's the hoarders of those, and 20 is just an outrageous amount. So if you'd like to, I will work on that and have that for the next meeting, and I will present you with an ordinance change. I'll be able to run it past our city attorneys as well and bring that back to you, and I think that'll help alleviate some of that issue as well then in the future. Perfect.
I think weren't we like the capital for puppy mills in all the states? I think I read something like
Yeah,
that.
we did do something, we addressed this not so very long ago because we went from no limit, and the concern of the council at the time was
Breed.
going from nothing to, we're going to limit it, what's the right number? And we struggled with that.
I'd rather see somebody, though, if they've got 20 pets, be listed as a breeder, so somebody's checking on things and making sure it's kosher. So I would say that there should be something built into anybody having over a certain number.
I think you'll find most communities are going to be in that 3 to 6 range.
I have 4 cats. What else?
Well, and within
Maybe
that
7.
number, you have the ability to have X number of this and X number of that to meet that number. So you're fine with that. So if you have 4 cats and 1 dog, but again, we're not coming up to your house because your cats are running the neighborhood rampant. And that's the point of this, to try and look at something more reasonable. I would say we probably have the highest number in the state of Iowa in our ordinance from everybody that I've checked with. So,
And
Actually, one of my cats is going to Arizona.
it is complaint-driven, by the way. It is not that we're going to go around looking for these opportunities.
Lucy.
All right.
thank you.
One of the problems
Thank you,
with that
Chief.
is when you get somebody that's got, they're feeding 20 cats,
Well, Jeff,
they may not let them in the house,
Jared and I.
Well,
but they're,
And that was our situation down here in the
I don't know how you
southeast.
solve that.
And it's still being worked on between Todd and I both. But this will give us more teeth to it, because when that situation was resolved in the southeast, they came to an agreement that was on paper, but it wasn't put through the court. And that person knows the rules that it says 20, so that person's like, well, I've got 20. Well, that's a problem for us anyway. So I think if we address this, then we can move forward, and then we'll have some consistency when we deal with the hoarding situations in the future.
Does that take into consideration too, I guess this would be my question, like any kind of health issues for those animals when they have that many?
Health issues are addressed if we have a hoarding situation at the time.
Okay.
Health situation for normal strays are addressed when we pick them up between either Cedar Bend Humane Society or we had one recently where the officer felt there was a problem with the dog, took it out to Family Animal Care Clinic, which still works great with us, even though they're not our repository for stray animals. They checked it over, they came with a general diagnosis, and then it still went on to Cedar Bend. So the evaluations are done based upon our view of the animal when we pick it up or when we deal with the hoarding situation every time.
Okay.
Good,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Sorry to come back up.
No, that's
Susie, you
okay.
got anything?
Not right now.
Okay, I'm sure Al does.
I'm good.
Wow. Well, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Just a